G'day Bomber fans! So obviously we had our practice match against the Bulldogs on Saturday. If you haven't watched the review I did for that video, for that match, go check it out. I posted it yesterday. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. For starters, I'm doing a more player-focused video, going through each individual and telling you how they did, but also just the format of this is going to be slightly different. It's going to be raw and unedited, no breaks in between, so it's just going to be me yapping on for as long as I can, kind of like a podcast vibe, so let me know how you're vibing that. And yeah, let's just get into it, I guess, going player by player, in order of number. Also, guys, remember, it is tough for one person to keep an eye on the entire team. One person talking about 28 different players. I definitely could have missed something. So if I did, let us know down in the comments below so those watching can, know what's really happening. But yeah, starting with Andy McGrath. So he was sitting pretty deep in defence a lot of the time, as he often does. He's often going to be on that line of 2 or 3 players sitting right back when we have ball in hand up the field. He doesn't really feature high up the ground much himself, so his ball use is generally in areas that don't result in much risk when we have ball in hand, in a calm situation at least. It's when he tries to, it's when he's on that last line under pressure, or when he's trying to inject pace into the game, that one of two things can happen. He's either going to run himself into trouble like he did in the fourth quarter, I think. He played on after a mark and got pinned for holding the ball outside the 50 arc. It was really unnecessary and just a complete lack of awareness. That can sometimes happen with McGrath. Or it can generate into a quick rise of territory. And I don't think we really saw heaps of McGrath providing run and dash, which I think is more of a testament to Dylan Shields' role. In fact, there were plenty of times where it was McGrath himself trying to put the ball in Shields' hands, and that's also because McGrath sits back deep for defensive reasons. He's usually the go-to against small forwards, so we need him down in D50 as much as possible. Now, he had a goal kicked on him early by Riley West, but that can be chalked down to poor defensive transitioning from the team more than anything. But no, I feel like the Dogs forwards didn't have that much of an impact. McGrath found himself quite often on Vandermeer or West, and Waitman a bit too. You saw Sheila McGrath in different smalls at times when defending, and neither looked shaky. I thought McGrath was fine. He had some poor moments, as did most in the team, but for the most part, it was a decent game from our leader back there. He showed composure when we needed him to, for the most part. He brought his teammates into the game, which injected some creativity and pace into our attacks, even if it wasn't from him directly. Something else to note was the fact that he actually also featured in a centre bounce. I think it was just the one, maybe two, but that in itself is quite odd. It was possibly because other mids were resting. I think by that stage, Merritt was done for the day, maybe Caldwell too, but it's still interesting to see him running through a centre bounce. It only really happened in one passage of the game. He was in defence for 99% of the match. Still something to note though. Sam Draper, I thought Draper was super dangerous. If you saw my video yesterday, you would know he was in my top 3 plays for the game. He started up forward early, and he played most of the game in the forward half. And we saw that really crafty crumbing goal off his own marking contest. He was a marking threat all day, no matter the weather really. He took a lovely specky in that second quarter, which was brutal conditions. He was just really a presence that would have been felt pretty heavily by the Dogs. He rucked a lot less than Brian. He was the second ruck, but was more dangerous up forward, and also I think more dynamic when rucking, especially late in the game. I thought he lasted the 4 quarters really well and didn't run out of legs like his opponents. He gave Crossley a bit of a bath in that fourth. He was probably best on ground for that quarter, just really providing contest after contest, and when rucking, he was putting the ball in such dangerous areas for us to launch. He's looking really fit. That's something to note. He's looking strong, fit, quick. Really, he's in the best shape I've seen him in for a long, long time. Yeah, I thought he was one of our best on ground, to be honest. He kicked the 2 goals, he rucked out a lot of important stoppages, made our midfield better. This was the best we've seen that dual ruck setup look, to be honest. Unfortunately, it's pre-season, but that obviously gives us hope going into the year. But yeah, Draper, it was a proper handful. I will say, though, he can probably work on his forward positioning when he isn't being used. I feel like there was a few times where he just provided us with clutter inside 50 when the contest wasn't his own. It's tough craft to learn, I guess, when the ball's not coming your way, and it is nitpicky. I did think he had a great game. Kyle Langford, bit of an almost day for Langford. You felt like he was getting into great positions to provide us with either that inside 50 on a counter or to be that marking target. But there were some uncharacteristic mistakes made by Langford, which I expect to be gone next week. He looked a little bit rusty, brushing off the cobwebs a bit, and that's fine. And not everyone's perfect to start the year straight away. I didn't think he was bad. He just We had some really good moments. There was a really powerful tackle outside 50 that showed he's also willing to buy into this forward pressure under Scott. And I thought he was good at finding space inside 50 to be a target. He just couldn't finish his chances, I felt. He was ultimately well held for the half of footy he played. He was rested after halftime to give Wright a go in the forward line. This is the big one. Elijah Sartas. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. Sorry, guys. I personally thought he was best on ground for us. I thought he was the cleanest of the inside mids, not with his disposal, but with his ball gathering and his hands. He would have had at least 25 disposals, and most of those would have been contested. A couple of handfuls of clearances too, I reckon. He was just a real presence in and under for us. It would have been good to see him go up against Bontempelli and Libber and Treloar, because he had some easier matchups on some midfielders that weren't really full-time midfielders for the Bulldogs. But the fact he dominated in those matchups was super promising. He put us on the front foot himself early, winning the first few clearances, and he didn't hold up from there. Just a pure inside mid performance. I tweeted out during the game, or on Blue Sky actually maybe, I don't think there are many players at the club who read the ball off hands better than Sartas. That stop his positioning and craft awareness was on full display. The only negative is ball use still, and you can excuse 90% of disposals because they were rushed in and under, just gaining territory in bad conditions. But there were one or two unforced errors even after a mark, and I hate turnovers after the whistle's blown. Short kicks, when you have no pressure, just have to be hit, and there were a couple of his that weren't, so he has to brush that up. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt for now because of the weather. We'll see how he goes against Geelong. If there are still lingering issues there, then I'll be worried. But yeah, aside from that, it was a near perfect hit out for Sartas. He was absolutely excellent. He really just has to play in opening round now. His fellow midfielder, Jai Caldwell, I thought he was excellent. He was the cleanest of our inside mids with ball in hand, I'd say. And the great thing about Caldwell is that he can genuinely do a lot more than most inside midfielders can. He's just such a rounded player. His inside game was strong. He was working hard to be involved in links around the ground on the outside. His attack on the ball was a reason why the midfield got the upper hand. And I really liked the way he limited the Dogs out of stoppages at times, and that's something that we've struggled with as a team. But I was watching his body checking pretty closely and just noticed the work he was putting in to make it hard for them to, I guess, move the ball out of stoppages easily. I just thought it was a really rounded game from Caldwell. It was very good. Looks like he's bringing back that 2024 form with no worries, which is great because, as we know, he was battling a hip issue until maybe a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, he did come off at three-quarter time, I believe. Maybe that's the reason why, just because he's not really ready for full-time minutes yet. So he didn't see out the match, got a bit of a rest, like his teammate Zach Merritt. Merritt came off at half-time, he only played the one half, but yeah, there's just not a lot to really say about Merritt. He was just playing as we expect him to play. I'm sure I could dive into his game and talk about why he was so good, but we've heard it so much already. What I will say, though, is I noticed him trying to get younger players involved in the game more, and that's just him being the leader he is. So he could have had a shot at goal early or pass it in the next link of a chain, but instead we saw him pass to Kako instead, or try and get those around him, experience with ball in hand and create through them. I thought that was really cool. Not much else to really say about Merritt, though. He's just as good as he usually is. Ben Hobbs, this was an interesting one going into the game, and overall it was a pretty positive game from Hobbs, which was necessary because his spot in the team is far from concrete. Obviously Durham and Parrish were missing, which gave him the chance to play midfield minutes, and I thought he did fine. He lost his opponent once or twice in a stoppage, which isn't ideal, but then again so did other midfielders in the team. He again had a really good attack on the ball. He was consistent with his effort. It wasn't fleeting. You felt like he was really calculated in his performance and very consistent and measured, which was good because some guys like to play in patches and rely on momentum. But Hobbs was always around, featured in quite a few centre bounces and didn't look out of place. It would have been interesting to see how he dealt playing on someone like Libber, like I said with Sartas before. That could have changed the outlook potentially, but he didn't. So we got to judge his game which for the most part was pretty good. I can't really write him off just yet as a player. Got a bit more to prove, it seems. He didn't do a lot wrong at all, but he still has levels to get to for him to, I guess, remain in first team calculations. I think just the fact that he got to play full midfield minutes for the whole game is a tick, though. It wouldn't have been the case if Parrish and Durham were available. And I guess that's a little silver lining in those injuries there, which we saw in a few other positions as well. Onto Dylan Shield. So he was a player many were going to be eagerly watching, not just at Essendon, but I guess anyone playing Supercoach. And that's always the case with a player in your new role as well. Shield off half-back. There's been lots of talk over the pre-season. Some aren't convinced, but I thought Shield was fantastic. He was easily one of our best in his new rebound defensive role. We saw him really drive out of the defensive half. He used that power in his legs that he's seemingly rediscovered. He looks a lot younger than he actually is now. The thing is, obviously, he's getting older, and his body isn't going to hold up for a full season in the engine room. So this move isn't just about benefiting the team, but also Shield himself. He clearly looks more comfortable and more fit playing with less pressure on his body, less demand on those legs. It allows him to utilise his strengths, which we saw firsthand. And the fact that he plays well and helps the team a great deal, it frees up Martin up forward. It provides us with serious class and leadership out of the back half. Shield just didn't put a foot wrong with ball in hand. He was taking players on, breaking the lines, using the pill well in the wet. That doesn't surprise me heaps. What I really loved to see, though, was his defensive game really stand up against some mid to decent forwards. That was surprising. He was one out on guys like Waitman at times and didn't get beaten a great deal at all. We obviously have to be keen about his ball use, but I'm most excited to actually see him defend well on the weekend. I thought that was great. I thought he was almost our best player on the field. I gave him 2 votes yesterday. And if he can continue what we saw on the weekend, then sky is the limit for season 2025. I was really excited by Shield. He was one of our best. Isaac Kako. Our first look at our new prize draftee, and he didn't disappoint. It's hard not to watch him. It's hard not to be a bit enthralled just seeing him run even near the ball. Sometimes you miss what other players are doing because you see Kako on frame or in frame. He kicked a lovely goal, and also I want to say, leading up to the goal, it was the work he did to get that hand pass out to, I think it was Nick Bryan outside 50, just weaving through about a million Bulldogs players to get there. It was a pretty great goal, and the highlights don't really do it justice because of the work he did before. So if you haven't seen the full goal, the full 30 seconds before, go check it out because it's just Kako in a nutshell. But yeah, he kicked his nice goal. He had a few missed chances as well. Had some really exciting passages where he weaved through more defenders to give his teammates the pill. But for me, what was most pleasing was the forward pressure and the work rate from Kako. He was arguably our best forward inside 50 at laying the heat, but there was a passage after a missed set shot where he worked immensely hard to get back into D50 to follow his direct opponent who was transitioning. It's that awareness and willingness to defend that I absolutely loved from Kako, because I don't think he got anything from that. He wouldn't have got a stat, but it's just applying pressure that makes it harder for the Bulldogs to attack, and that's that culture that we're trying to form at Essendon because we've been so bad at defending the footy. But for a young player in his first year, in his first game really, to be doing that, I mean, it shows that he's ready to play now. He's worked hard on that side of his game, that pressure, that defensive pressure. It's awesome to see it come to fruition. I thought it was a great first performance. Will Setterfield, he only played the 1 quarter, if I'm not mistaken. If he did play after halftime, he was really quiet in the third. I think he only came on for the last. He lived inside the contest. I mean, he looked alright. His defensive pressure was felt. So he's clearly an option for us if we need coverage in the midfield. I think he might have been doing some negating roles as he's been doing this pre-season. And yeah, he's just... I would have liked to see more from him. Not if in terms of his actual performance, because I thought he was okay when he played, but just actually playing more. And I didn't watch the VFL game, unfortunately. I had a dinner to go to, so I don't know how he went there. And I haven't seen too many talk about the VFL. So if you know anything about that game, if you watched it, please leave your thoughts in the comments down below, because I'd love to see how guys like Jerian and Lawal and Setterfield went, and Wright when he played there, because I believe he did too. But yeah, Setterfield, from the quarter we saw of him, I thought he passed the test. Probably the biggest talking point of the game is Tom Edwards. I mean, he's probably won the SSP battle just from that game, you'd think. He played one half of footy and kicked 4 goals, and it's just wild to think about that. It's not just the 4 goals as well. It's the way he kicked those goals. There was something really different about them all, which highlighted his forward craft and smarts. So the first one, he worked really hard with the moving footy to be front and centre for Wright's hand pass with his first goal, and snapped it from about 20 out. He had excellent judgment of his lead for the second and took a nice little pack mark. His third, that was just a freak mark, really. I don't get how his hands could be that sticky in those conditions from a Sam Draper proper floater. And the fourth goal was just pure awareness. it's funny because he doesn't look like that imposing a player. He kind of plods along and doesn't get involved a great heap in general play, but he's clearly really intelligent with knowing how to be in dangerous areas forward of the ball. He pops up for goals. I thought he was our most dangerous forward when on the ground, which is wild because he's only been at the club for a few weeks now. But no, I was really impressed with him. His aerobic ability too to get up and down the ground a bit. I think that's probably why the club's so interested in him, because he can one, score goals and find himself in great attacking positions, but also work pretty hard himself to get around and defend, which is what the club is looking for in forwards, and why Jake Stringer was obviously let go to the Giants. Speaking of Jake Stringer, his replacement Archie Perkins. So I mean, that game is kind of the perfect example of what we need from him, because I'd say he only got 15 or so disposals for the whole match, but it's the impact of those touches and when they occur. He flicked the switch for us in that second term on his own. He kicked 2 really important goals. He was hard at it and applied more pressure than I've seen from him in a long time. He was strong in his hips. He featured in a few centre bounces. That's really what we need from him as he replaces Stringer. I don't care about the 20 disposal, 3-goal games if they're followed up with nothing like we saw in 2023 and 2024, actually. Sorry. I'd much rather a season of performances like that. 15 disposals and 2 goals. I know people want him running through the midfield more, but I thought that role on Saturday really suited his playstyle. I can see Perkins averaging 15 touches and kicking 20 to 25 goals this year. That would be a great output for a guy who's replacing Stringer. He's a low disposal, high impact player, and everything he did felt really impactful. The stats wouldn't say heaps. I haven't seen them. I don't think there are really any around, but I thought he was up there with our best 5 or 6 players. Lewis Hayes, I thought he looked really good. He had a really solid wet weather defensive game of footy. He wasn't trying to do too much. You didn't see him trying to go for intercept clunks or anything. It was usually fist to the ball. Whether that's him playing to the weather or him playing to abilities, I guess we will find out as time goes on. But for what we saw, I thought there were some great signs. There aren't stats, but I would say he's probably leading or close to it for aerial spoils. He was just breaking down inside 50s when he could. So that was really good to see, especially because for large parts of the game he was on Aaron Norton or decent forwards who have actually played AFL. I thought he had a better outing than Zach Reed, and I'm not saying he's ahead of him in the pecking order or anything, but it was pleasing to see him come in and actually show stability like that with most of our key defensive strength not playing, because we got to remember that there was no Ridley, no Mackay, no Laverty even, so for Reed and Hayes to come in and be that defensive duo against Sam Darcy and Aaron Norton, I thought they did a really good job. I don't think they're getting enough credit. Peter Wright, yeah, I mean, I don't know. He just didn't really get into the game. It was frustrating because as soon as he came on, he found himself in a really fantastic position on the counter-attack. And the play, the ball was moving really nicely, but it just fizzed out, not giving him the chance to find the footy despite the hard work to get into a good area. He could have had a set shot from a nice kick there, but the play fizzed out in front of him. He did have a set shot later on a tougher angle, which obviously I think it got caught up in the wind and didn't even make the distance. He also had a snap out of a contest which missed as well. It was just a day that you feel like he needed a goal as a reward, because I do think he did a lot right. People always bag him for lots of reasons, and fair enough. But the annoying thing with Wright is that he did a lot right to create space for those around him. I feel like he was miles less impactful than Draper, but his positioning often allowed others to shine a little bit more, whereas Draper can sometimes create clutter inside 50, as I said. But that's all well and good to position yourself well, but it's hard to be impressed with Wright. He just didn't really get around the ball enough. He was holding back a bit, you felt. Pretty much the case with last year and the form he showed there. He does so much right with his positioning and puts himself into dangerous areas at times, but he's either not used or not competent when he is used. And also the conditions really didn't suit him at all for a game like this. Unfortunately, Wright is the type of player who flourishes in certain conditions, under the roof at Marvel, and here we got a slog with poor weather and a genuine breeze. I thought there were some parts of his game early which were good. His involvement in the first Edwards goal, getting in and under to rip out the handball for him. I thought we were about to see Wright inject himself into the game after that. I was actually really pleased, but we just didn't. So yeah, that's proof, I reckon, that Wright is not in first team calculations right now. He needs to have a big game against the Cats next week. And honestly, if the squad sizes are reduced, which I think they will be for the pre-season games, I think it'll just be the 23. I wonder if he's even in that first team, especially because you've got guys like Durham and Parrish, Durham and Ridley and Mackay returning. I think those three are set to come back. So he could definitely be squeezed out of the team, especially because you had Nate Caddy working well, Tom Edwards showing plenty. So yeah, I don't know if Peter Wright's even close to being in that first team right now. He has to do a lot to get there. Archie Roberts, he was playing in defence for the first 3 quarters. I actually thought he was poor to start the game. He made plenty of mistakes, some of them unforced, some him succumbing to pressure, but as the game carried on, he found himself involved more and more, and almost forced himself into better situations through opportunity alone. He ended up playing on the wing in the last quarter, so I think we can safely say that he's behind El Hawley in the pecking order for the wing. He played much less in that position. He was a bit rusty with the ball use early, but his attack was strong. I did really like seeing him stick up for Nick Martin. Was it Nick Martin? Yeah, I think it was Nick Martin who... Aaron Norton was getting stuck into Martin, and Roberts was the one who came in to stick up for his teammate, which was good, because he is about 20 centimetres smaller than Norton. You can tell he doesn't hold back if someone's bigger than him. It's a great attitude to have. So even though he wasn't great or wasn't consistent, I thought he showed tremendous character, not just to help his teammate, but to bounce back after a pretty poor start and find a bit of composure as the game went along. So I don't think he had a great game. He maybe not even a good game, but still one that impressed me because he showed character in more ways than one. Harry Jones, another one on the wing. He played pretty much exclusively as a wingman, I felt. If he didn't, it was probably 80% of the game. And it was honestly pretty frustrating because I thought he was finding himself in decent positions as he always does. He's a very smart footballer. And when the ball was around him, it wasn't always bad. He had some bad moments, but he was generally fine as usual. I just felt like he wasn't involved. I don't even remember if he played out the game, to be honest. I thought he was one of the quieter Essendon players on the field for us. Is that because he was poor? Is it because he's been wasted in a position that 100% doesn't suit him? I'm not saying that he's bad on the wing, but I just think I'd like to see him split wing and forward a bit more than we saw on the weekend. And I don't know, it's tough to judge when there are so many players switching around him as well, because with 23 players, it would be very different. He wouldn't need to make room for as many forwards in the forward line. He was playing alongside Draper, Caddy, Langford, Wright, Edwards. There were a lot of tall forwards in there, so you kind of had to have him on a wing at times. He could switch positions a bit more with a 23-man team, but no, I thought Jones was one of our poorer players. He was alright without the ball, a big reason why we were hard to transition against, but he didn't do a lot with it. He was definitely one of the quieter Essendon players. Nick Bryan, I thought he worked really well on the ruck. He took most of the centre bounces, and the great test was seeing how he went against that big moustache man from the Bulldogs. I've forgotten his name. Big moustache man is what we're going to call him. Brandon something. But yeah, he's a large unit, that bloke. Brandon Crossley. Yeah. I thought that was going to be an interesting one because I felt like Nick Bryan could break even with Tim English because just the size differential, and Bryan's always been a really decent ruck against blokes not stronger than him. But Crossley's a big boy. I thought he actually did all right. I thought he broke even most of the time, if not beat him in stoppages, which was good. His ruck craft is really solid, and it allows him to compete against blokes much stronger than him. I thought he was working well around the ground as well. He was slotting into our back half well, but when behind the ball, kind of imposing himself in marking contests, taking a few intercept marks. The only thing is, I don't know where he really plays when Draper is in the ruck, because Bryan is usually positioned in the ruck when he's playing, and when he's rucking Draper's forward. But when Draper's in the ruck, there's not really a spot for Bryan to rest and, I guess, impact the team in a positive way. I didn't really see him do anything forward of the ball. That is my one nitpick, just how we can best utilise Bryan when he's resting. So I guess we're going to have to figure out ways to do that. I know many talk about the fact that he can kick a goal, but I didn't really see that last year. I only think he had a handful in the VFL. So I'd really like to see some signs that he can not only ruck out a game, but also be impactful when he's resting, because that's the sign of a good ruckman, one that can be really impactful in stoppages and also around the ground, like we saw with Draper. Jackson Pryor. Tell you what, he had me frustrated early. You guys know how much I like Pryor, so it means a lot for me to say that. But no, I thought Pryor was in a bit of a cycle of doing nice things and then following them up with less nice things. I think he took a really nice intercept mark and followed it out with a kick out on the full. He had some shocking turnovers, 2 out on the full, I believe. both in the second quarter, I want to say, or maybe the first. I did like the way he settled in there overall, though, in defence. He's first and foremost a reliable defender, and we saw plenty of that. He proved to us that he is an AFL player, very unlucky to be delisted by the Lions. You guys would know that I rate him a fair bit more than most do. I think he's just about first team, and the way he was used on Saturday suggests that too. He isn't a flashy player. He isn't Shield or Redmond rebounding out of defence. He's just a no-nonsense Jake Kelly type defender. He did his job, can't ask for too much more than that. Get rid of those shocker kicks, and he's probably one of our more reliable players on the day. And usually he is a fairly reliable kick as well. So I think we can give him the benefit of the doubt. Kane Baldwin. Oh, man, there's a lot of Kane Baldwin fans in the Essendon community, and I think they were all... Although it was great to see Tom Edwards go about it, there would be some... I don't know, it was just a brutal day for Kane Baldwin. He didn't really do a lot wrong himself. He had a couple of bad turnovers, which was uncharacteristic. One of them resulted in a goal back over his head. He was solid defensively. He copped a knock and carried on as well. It's just the fact that he had to sit in a backline that didn't get much action and watch his SSP rival Tom Edwards kick 4 goals down the other end. I mean... I was pretty confident going into the game that we'd choose Baldwin of the two. I expected him to be as solid as he was, and he did look at home. He took a nice intercept mark. He was generally a pretty good defender, but Edwards was just really good down the other end. It was surprising. So unfortunately for Baldwin, who's done really well this preseason, I think the SSP duel might be wrapped up. I don't think we play our next game before the deadline of that. I'm not 100% sure in saying that, but if we don't, I mean, it'd be strange for us to not sign Tom Edwards after his performance. So I think, unfortunately, Kane Baldwin's may have missed his chance of being signed for the Bombers again, which, honestly, to be fair, I was a bit sceptical with that anyway. I thought if we were going to replace, or I guess add depth to our defence, it should have been someone with less injury worries than Kane Baldwin. Mason Redmond, pretty brutal day for him for different reasons. He copped an absolute belter of a knock going back with the flight. This is a tough bloke, so to see him stay down for even 10 seconds, you know that would have hurt like hell. He did well to finish the quarter, but he wasn't seen after that. He played just the one half. Something I think we should note is Redmond was our designated kick-in taker when on the field, I believe. I'm pretty sure... when he was in the back line, he took pretty much every possible kick in. So that's interesting. It's probably because we want Shield to be that second or third link in the chain going out of defence, and Redmond to maybe even act as that overlap, because we know how good his running ability is. Shield did take quite a few kick-ins, but I think most of them occurred when Redmond was off the field. But no, Redmond was decent. Nothing too extraordinary. Just went about his business as usual. Where are we? Xavier Dersma. I thought he was fantastic. He was genuinely one of our best players in my opinion. He is most of what you want in a traditional wingman. He doesn't get forward and hit the scoreboard a heap, but when he does, he's very accurate. We know that. But I really like his work to get back into defence. I think it is so valuable. He's quickly becoming, honestly, one of our most important players in my opinion, just because we don't really have a wingman as consistent and reliable as him. Dersma was brilliant. His tackling was ferocious. He proved a solid aerial competitor with some spoils in D50 as well. And there seemed to be some real leadership on show as well. So I also like the way he was featuring on the outside of a stoppage around the ground. He would have had a handful of successful clearances throughout the day, which is it's just a draw to a string to his bow, draw to his string. You know what I'm trying to say. But yeah, just a really good wingman's game. Couldn't have really done much more than he did. If he stays fit, we're a much better team. I've said this all the time. I really like Dersma. He's one of my favourite players at Essendon. I think he's hugely underrated. Jai Menzie. Menzie, everyone's going to hate on Menzie. I'm expecting to see some criticism of his game, but I honestly thought he was doing a lot right. I thought his efforts in applying pressure were really solid. He and Kako especially were making it really hard for the Dogs' defence. He did really well to get the goal and probably should have had another. I believe it was him who had those lightning quick hands to set up Edwards' fourth goal as well. So he was really involved in scoring. I thought he had a good game. I think he's proven that he's still got a place in the team if he can earn it. That would have been a passable performance in the AFL. I think he did a lot more to help the team than hinder it. You've got to be happy with it, but there were a few moments. I think there was a hand pass late in the game, a 5-metre hand pass, which I don't know how he butchered it, but he did. It was honestly pretty impressive. But yeah, for the most part, I thought Menzie was actually pretty good, which was necessary because he was coming into the game under a lot of pressure, not so from the club landscape, but more so from the fan base. Bloke not under any pressure whatsoever is Nate Caddy. So I think if you package together his highlights of the game, he didn't actually do heaps on Saturday, but he was everything he was trying to do, which I really, really loved. You saw him actively trying to inject run into the game through his own legs, which is just, it's dangerous for defenders because he's such a strange size to be that mobile. And then later on, to prove that, he would be going up and trying to take speckies in the pouring rain. So you kind of saw glimpses into how he could be such a tricky matchup for defenders. He throws himself into marking contests, and a lot of the time without function or structure to it. He's very chaotic, very raw. Needs to brush that up a bit at times, because there are often just leaps into nothing which aid the opponent, if anything. But when it works, it really works, and that second quarter siren goal is proof of that. The kick from 55 was brilliant, but it's the work he did to get that mark in the first hand, which I love. He was out of position, coming from behind the pack, and he grabs the mark in front of defenders who had a better spot than him. This is what we need from our key forwards. Peter Wright, take notes. It wasn't a great or even good performance from Caddy, but it was really pleasing to watch his attack on the ball and his effort he put in. There is so much he is doing right at the moment. If he can brush up some of his weaknesses, with time we know this, he's going to become a star. So there is so much potential on show in this game on Saturday. Finished product, not really, but the work he was doing, I loved. I think we're going to see some really impressive performances from him in 2025. I will say, I don't think we're going to see much consistency yet. He's just a second-year player, so we have to lower expectations, but I really liked what I saw on Saturday. Zach Reed. So he got a bit of a bath early. I thought he was one-on-one, he was looking really solid when in a good position, but it was the work leading up to marking contests that was letting him down a bit. Sam Darcy had an extra step or two on him 3 times in that first quarter, which you just do not want to see. So I think maybe it's just getting a bit more physical while the inside 50 is on its way to stop a lead getting out to a dangerous spot from a player. There was also one occasion too where I think it was Jackson Pryor who found himself defending Sam Darcy. So Darcy, who was his direct opponent, was having a really good start to a game and losing Reed a bit too easily. The only thing that saved Reed was Darcy's goal kicking. He only kicked the 1 when it really should have been 3. He had less to do as the game went on, Reed, but also I think that proves he was getting that early contest work in and not allowing his opponent to get a good chance to mark. So I think he improved in that regard, and that's pleasing to see. It should also be noted that he got through the game. That's all that I really wanted to see. I wouldn't care if Darcy kicked 15 goals on him, as long as Reed got through with some real footy experience and AFL experience. I was going to be happy. So to see him play a full game, I don't think he really came off for a rest at all. That was really pleasing. So more of that from Reed. He did take a kick in or two as well, which proves it's just a testament to his ball use. We haven't seen heaps of him with ball in hand over the years, but from what we've seen, it's pretty damn decent. But yeah, the main thing is just the fact he got through the game and rebounded hard after a poor start. Decent match sim with some cons early. I think he'll improve against the Cats. I'm keen to see how he goes against the likes of Jeremy Cameron and that. Angus Clark, excited to see him play because he's got the mum's tick of approval, as we know. He came on after half-time and looked proper shaky. My mum would have been very upset watching that. Would have heard some poor boy chants. Well, not chants, but yeah, he looked shaky. He's a very composed player. He was in his junior years, but some of those early disposals were just not ideal. I think the nerves might have got to him, and that happens. It's a young kid playing against stars of the competition. You cannot expect him to be perfect. He definitely wasn't early, but he did settle a bit as the game went on, and he found his feet and settled into the game, and we saw some of that composure on show, which was good. I mean, this kid wouldn't have played if we had a fully fit team, so honestly, I'm just happy to see him step out and have this opportunity. He's got to learn from it. I think it's much more valuable at this time of your career in a preseason game to have an average game against an AFL side than a decent one in the VFL. I think he showed that he still has a lot to do before he's ready to play AFL, and I've been saying that that's the case since he was drafted. He's going to take time. But yeah, Clark was all right. I'm just happy we got to see him play this early. Nick Martin, so he was playing pretty much the one role the whole game, which to me suggests that's his role for the year. He was starting forward of the ball on a flank and then kind of positioning himself around that centre square to be that link-up player who can push forward to either hit the scoreboard when we're in possession or be that inside 50, that entry kick, which is where we love him. So I think Martin in the forward half of the field is what we need. That there's plenty happy with this move. There were a few times when he was even actually outside our 50 when we had the ball inside, and I guess that's to, one, give us numbers where we need them for the counter-attack, but also for him to be that entry, that designated entry kicker as well. So he had some interesting little positions to his game. The one constant was the fact that he was always he was always positioned on that fat side of the field, whether he was back of a stoppage or further up the ground. He was always going to be where the space was or where space could be. So you can clearly try to see what the team's trying to do with him. It just didn't really work too much on the weekend. He didn't get his usual leather poisoning, and that's okay. I'm sure that's going to change against the Cats. I trust him to bounce back. I will say I was expecting to see him feature in a centre bounce or two, but I guess the weather doesn't really suit his contested play style as much as Sartas or Hobbs. But yeah, Martin was okay, not as prolific as we've come to expect him to be, but far from a liability. He's just kind of finding his feet in the new role a bit, which for those wanting him on the forward line or in the forward flank, they're going to be happy to see him there. Almost done, guys. Thank you for sticking around. Reece Unwin, so he came on a bit after half-time. Like Angus Clark. He was a bit of a non-entity for the first 5 or 10 minutes of his own game. I saw him chasing the ball a few times a bit, but there wasn't really too much to note early. I think it was the fourth term where we saw him get involved more, which was really good to see him get involved after a slow start. But he had a couple of really nice moments. He is going to be a forward, but you can kind of see why he played midfield as a junior. He's a lot more composed and clean at the level than I expected him to be. He didn't really, I think his first disposal or first few disposals, he didn't take time to settle in like Angus Clark. He was just click of the fingers and just composed. So we didn't get to see him utilise his trademark pace or anything, but that's not really much of an issue because we saw strength in other areas, especially when you're only on the field for a little over a quarter of play. So I thought he was okay. Much like Clark, I'm just happy we got to see him play so early into his career. I thought he showed really good signs. Obviously, there wasn't too much of him, but I'm sure we're going to see plenty of performances like that in the VFL. I think he's probably going to play AFL this year, as I said in my debutant video. And finally, Sardell Hawley, or Sardell Halawi, whatever the commentator was pronouncing his name as. So he was playing on the wing for the first 3 quarters and then swapped into defence with Roberts, who went onto the wing himself. That to me suggests he has that wing spot locked up and secured for opening round, and I thought he was pretty good. He was obviously not at the level of Dersma on the other side, and maybe there was some ball chasing where he could have been more structurally aware, but he was involved a lot. He put himself into attacking positions. I feel like he was the attacking wingman and Dersma was more defensive, and whether that's by design or it's a maturity thing, I don't know. I think he has a lot that he needs to work on still, but I'd say he's our starting wingman ahead of Roberts. The question is whether we will utilise him ahead of Jones or not. I personally thought he was more involved than Jones, but maybe not as structured as him. That could be misreading because wingers are often hard to judge on KO, or it could just be the fact that this was his first AFL-ish game of footy at a high level. But no, good signs. He's going to play AFL early. I liked Hawley and I liked the rest of the team. That is that. Cheers for watching a longer video with a different structure. Thank you for sitting through the Yap session. If you enjoyed this, let me know. I'll try and do more videos like this as I guess evolve the channel. And also let me know what you think of players down below, because again, I may have seen things differently to you. It's hard to keep an eye on all 28 players, especially when some of my favourites are playing so well. So let me know if I missed anything. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always guys, go Bombers.